Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Fiona G. President Donald Trump hosts French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House today. What they say about the war in Ukraine and the current peace negotiations. Today marks 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. What European officials say about Ukraine possibly joining Western alliances. House lawmakers return to Capitol Hill today. The first order of business is playing catch-up with their Senate colleagues on the Republicans' big budget plans. Democrats say they're standing in strong opposition. Federal workers suing Elon Musk. Musk is threatening to fire them if they fail to explain their accomplishments. New York City is to close the Central Migrant Processing Center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. We'll have more on Mayor Eric Adams' latest move. Swiss politicians congratulate Shenyun Performing Arts on 4 sold-out performances in the city of Lausanne, inspiring them with what they describe as a message of truth and freedom.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
President Donald Trump is hosting French President Emmanuel Macron today at the White House. Trump answered reporters' questions on peace negotiations for the Russia-Ukraine war.
I will be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final deal. It'll be a deal with rare earths and various other things, and he would like to come, as I understand it, here to sign it, and that would be great with me. I think they then have to get it approved by their council or whoever might approve it, but I'm sure that will happen. I think the war could end soon.
Well, how soon?
Within weeks.
Weeks?
Yeah, I think so. Right? Don't you think so? I'd like to have you. I think we could end it within weeks if we're smart. If we're not smart, it'll keep going, and we'll keep losing young, beautiful people that shouldn't be dying. And we don't want that. And remember what I said. This could escalate into a third world war. And we don't.
Macron is expected to try to convince Trump not to rush into a ceasefire deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin at any cost, keep Europe involved, and discuss military guarantees to Ukraine. Trump and Macron both joined a video conference with other G7 leaders about Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed G7 leaders during the video conference and said he's working productively with the U.S. on an economic deal. He repeated that both Europe and Ukraine should be involved in a peace process. Today marks exactly 3 years since Russia invaded neighboring Ukraine. Now, more than ever, Kyiv wants to strengthen its ties with the West. President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed world leaders in Kyiv today. Take a look.
Will there be support from America?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hosting world leaders on Monday's 3-year anniversary of the Russian invasion. This comes amid heightened tensions between President Trump and Zelensky. The Ukrainian president highlighted the need for American assistance during his speech in Kyiv on Monday. He also reflected on Ukraine possibly not being able to join Western alliances.
We have to be honest. Ukraine deserves EU membership as well as security guarantees which NATO offers. If NATO membership for Ukraine, for our people, will remain closed, then we have no other choice but to build NATO in Ukraine.
Zelensky touted increasing Ukraine's economy and military force to withstand Russia. This comes after Britain said it might send its forces to Ukraine after the war ends to act as peacekeepers. Zelensky is hosting a number of international officials in Kyiv. Among the attendees was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who was optimistic about Ukraine joining the bloc.
Ukraine merits-based process, if they continue at that speed and at that quality, perhaps they could be earlier than 2030.
There was no immediate sign of U.S. representation at Monday's 3-year anniversary of the war.
And staying on this conflict, earlier today, Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping affirmed his no-limits friendship with Moscow. This in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The news was reported by Chinese state-owned media. The talk between China and Russia comes as President Trump pushes for a quick deal to settle the war in Ukraine, citing mounting casualties. Trump said he, quote, had very good talks with Putin last week, raising the question of whether the U.S. could draw a wedge between Beijing and Moscow. And China's call with Russia earlier today appeared aimed at dispelling any such prospects. The Chinese regime leader said China and Russia cannot be moved apart, and they are looking at a long-term partnership. Mutual tensions with the United States have moved China and Russia closer together. They first declared a no-limits friendship back in 2022 after Putin deployed troops to invade Ukraine. Over the past decade, the two leaders have met over 40 different times. Britain unveils new sanctions against Russia, hoping this will force Putin to make concessions in peace negotiations. Britain's Prime Minister says President Trump has changed the global conversation. European leaders are now focused on ensuring any peace in Ukraine is long-lasting. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson reports from London.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has imposed further sanctions on Russia as part of an attempt to force President Vladimir Putin to make concessions in peace negotiations. Here's Starmer speaking to a gathering of Ukraine's allies on the third anniversary of the war.
So today we're announcing the UK's largest packet of sanctions since the early days of the war, going after Russia's shadow fleet and going after companies in China and elsewhere who are sending military components.
Russia's so-called shadow fleet is used to transport oil and goods in defiance of sanctions. The new sanctions cover 40 shadow fleet ships as well as 14 wealthy Russian individuals. North Korean officials involved in sending troops to fight for Russia were also listed, as were companies in China, Turkey and India that supply tools and goods to Russia's military. Starmer also told Ukrainian allies they must bring their collective strength to peace efforts.
President Trump has changed the global conversation over the last few weeks, and it has created an opportunity. Now we must get the fundamentals right.
Starmer said any settlement must be based on a sovereign Ukraine and backed by strong security guarantees. He added the UK is ready and willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. He also repeated calls for the US to act as a backstop to deter Russia from launching another invasion in a few years' time. President Trump's talks with Russia and his description of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator have drawn wide criticism from European leaders. British Home Office Minister Dan Jarvis said it was right for Trump to bring Putin back to the negotiating table.
And in the end, I think there's been an acknowledgement for a long time that this conflict is not going to be concluded on the battlefield. It will be concluded as a consequence of a negotiated peace settlement.
He said the US, UK and other allies have a significant role to play in achieving this, though he said this has to be on terms agreeable to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. Starmer is due to travel to Washington and will meet Trump on Thursday, where he's expected to talk to Trump about support for Ukraine. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Bringing it back now to the U.S., a federal judge has blocked the Department of Government Efficiency from accessing data from the Department of Education and the Office of Personnel Management. A coalition of labor unions argued the agencies wrongly granted DOGE access to personal information of millions of Americans. That information includes social security numbers, dates of birth, home addresses, income and assets, and citizenship status. The Trump administration has argued that blocking DOGE and advisors from accessing that data would impede the president's agenda. Now, several lawsuits have been filed to block DOGE from accessing government systems. On Friday, a federal judge in New York extended an order blocking access to Treasury Department systems. Moving on now, an email sent to federal employees asking them to report what they accomplished in the past week has sparked debate. Elon Musk, a key advisor to President Trump, has suggested those who fail to respond could face consequences. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
Federal employees, including some judges, court staff, and federal prison officials, received a 3-line email with this instruction. Please reply to this email with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week and CC your manager. Department of Government Efficiency member Elon Musk wrote Saturday on X, If federal workers do not reply to the email, it will be seen as a resignation. Musk wrote that the policy is consistent with President Trump's instructions. He also suggested that some federal employees are so disengaged that they're not even reading their emails. Musk implied that some federal workers might be using fake or deceased identities to collect paychecks, which he called outright fraud. Musk also said that there have been a large number of positive responses, suggesting those individuals should be considered for promotion. President Trump wrote on Truth Social over the weekend that Musk is doing a great job, but he would like to see him get more aggressive. The Office of Personnel Management confirmed the directive and stated that each agency would decide on next steps. Democrats were critical of the email sent to federal employees. Representative Jerry Connolly criticized the email as illegal and reckless, while Senator Tina Smith compared the situation to dealing with a bad boss, writing, "There's an email in your inbox on Saturday night saying, 'Prove to me your worthiness by Monday or else.'" House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says Musk is traumatizing hard-working federal employees, their children, and families. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense waded into the controversy and advised people to ignore the email from the Office of Personnel Management. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now federal workers are suing Elon Musk over his threat to fire them if they fail to explain their accomplishments. They filed a lawsuit in federal court in California. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of unions, businesses, veterans, and conservation organizations represented by the group State Democracy Defenders Fund. It alleges that Musk had violated the law with his demand through the Office of Personnel Management. It says, quote, "No OPM rule, regulation, policy, or program has ever in United States history purported to require all federal workers to submit reports to OPM." It calls the threat of mass firings, quote, "one of the most massive employment frauds in the history of this country." Several federal agencies have told their employees to ignore Musk's demand, including the FBI, the State Department, Homeland Security, and the Pentagon. And Elon Musk said today that starting this week, government workers would be put on administrative leave if they fail to return to the office. Musk wrote on X, quote, "Those who ignored President Trump's executive order to return to work have now received over a month's warning." The U.S. Agency for International Development is laying off at least 1,600 workers in the U.S. Others will be placed on administrative leave. This move comes after a federal judge lifted a temporary restraining order blocking the planned staff cuts. All remaining USAID direct hire personnel were placed on administrative leave globally after midnight yesterday. Some exceptions include those handling, quote, "mission-critical functions, core leadership, and specially designated programs." Now, it's unclear how many essential workers will be retained by the State Department agency. A Congressional Research Service report published in January showed that USAID has more than 10,000 employees. About 2/3 of those serve overseas. And back now to that email sent by the Office of Personnel Management asking government employees to list some 5 accomplishments and CC their managers is generating controversy. Some federal agencies like the Drug Enforcement Administration and Federal Communications Commission have told their employees to respond, others telling their personnel to hold off until they can determine a course of action. Now, joining us now to break this down is Michael Busler, a public policy analyst and professor of finance at Stockton University. Michael, it's always great to see you. I just want to ask you here, is this type of a requirement or demand, this type of an email, is it standard practice for the federal government?
No, it isn't standard practice at all. And perhaps that's why the federal government has become so bloated. Look, the big picture is we have to cut down on government spending, not to give tax breaks to anybody, although we'd like to give tax breaks to everybody, but we have to cut down on government spending. For the last 5 years, the federal government has spent over $11 trillion more than they brought in revenue. The current budget is calling for almost a $2 trillion deficit. We have to get government spending down. So one thing that they looked at initially, they said, look, the federal government employs 2 million people. Do we need all of those people, especially since one study, I believe by Senator Joni Ernst, found that only 6% of government workers work 5 days a week in their office. And as a result of that, we have a lot of empty office buildings. So what Musk said is, look, we have to pare the workforce. We have to cut it down and cut government spending. So let's take a look and just at everybody, and let's have everybody make sure they're doing a job that is needed. Now, some departments like, the FBI and the CIA, they can't tell you what they did last week. A lot of it's classified. But there are a number of employees that all he's asking is, name 5 things that you did last week. He says the ones who are complaining the most about that are the ones that are having a tough time writing down 5 things that they did last week. So the workforce has to be reduced. Remember when Musk bought Twitter, he reduced the workforce by 75%. And Twitter, now called X, is operating efficiently. He wants to take a look at government employees and do a similar thing.
Right, and I was just going to say it seems that Musk and Doge are bringing some private sector practices into the federal government.
It's exactly right. Musk has a team of what I call techno nerds, young people that are very good technologically, and they're examining everything the government's doing. And some of the systems are so antiquated, they're back from the 80s or 70s even. So Trump says, look, if we can come in and modernize these systems and bring in technology, we can do it. We can accomplish the same goals the government has to accomplish with far less people. So one thing he started with, look, the people that are the easiest to lay off are the ones that were newly hired, because typically when you go through layoffs, it goes by seniority. So it's a hardship, obviously, on those that are newly hired and in probationary period. But he said, look, let's start there, and we have to get the workforce down so that we can get the federal government spending down, so we can eventually tackle the $36 trillion that the federal government is in debt.
Michael, I want to ask you this. I think it's very notable that the FBI and the State Department have both told their workers not to respond, saying, this jurisdiction over evaluating employee performance really lies within the departments themselves. What do you make of that?
Well, in those sensitive areas where you simply can't say what you did last week because a lot of it's classified, I understand that those departments and agencies should be evaluated internally. But what Musk wanted to do was to get this thing started as quickly as possible. So he said, look, I'm going to say this applies to everybody, and then we'll start looking for some exceptions.
Now, I think it's also important to note here that the OPM email didn't actually include that resignation ultimatum that Musk had posted about on X. But then the lawsuit we're seeing right now against this email, it says that the email was unlawful. What's your take?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me if your employer asks you what you did last week, I can't see how that is illegal. Now, if you're doing something sensitive, like the FBI or the CIA may be doing, I can understand some hesitancy. But I mean, suppose anybody, you walked into work on Monday and your employer said, hey, you don't like you do much last week. What did you do last week? Don't you have a right, an obligation to tell your employer what you did? That's the way I see it.
Absolutely. Now, we also saw Trump posting on Truth Social. He listed 5 accomplishments from the past week. And then he said, Elon is doing a great job, but I would like to see him get more aggressive. Michael, what would that look like?
So here's the thing. The way the government normally does things, well, we have too much government spending. So let's form a bipartisan committee. We'll get together. We'll study the issue. We'll meet 4 or 5 times. We'll come up with some suggestions. We'll evaluate those suggestions. And 6, 8, 10 months go by and nothing has been done. Trump says we have to create a sense of urgency with our government in order to get the spending down. The only way to create that sense of urgency is for Elon Musk to become aggressive. And that's what he wants Elon Musk to do, come up with a lot of things we could cut, and we'll start examining. When Musk started looking at some of the things that U.S. Agency for Development did, there was millions of dollars going for ridiculous things. $20 million to build Sesame Street in Iraq, and a whole bunch of things that American taxpayers really don't want to spend their money on. We have enough problems here, plus we're deficit spending. So let's get very aggressive. Let's create a sense of urgency. Let's not wait months. Let's attack this today before this gets out of hand. And that's why I want Musk to be more aggressive.
And I think that will all play into Trump's ultimate goal as well of making the government more transparent. Michael Busler, public policy analyst and professor of finance at Stockton University. Great talking to you as always.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
When we come back, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announces his own DOGE task force. He says the new group will streamline government in the Sunshine State. And the migrant crisis that pressed New York City for years seems to be wrapping up. New York City Mayor Eric Adams announcing the closure of the city's Central Migrant Processing Center. Stay tuned for that and more after the break.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return. Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other. Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness. 2025, the 5th NTD International Photography Competition. Capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
See it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
If you love them enough to crawl into a play place to get them to come down, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
House lawmakers are returning to a week of catch-up with the Senate. As leadership pushes for one big bill stuffed with GOP priorities, it's still unclear if Speaker Mike Johnson has the votes. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
House lawmakers are preparing to vote on a budget resolution that will pave a path for one large bill to address Republicans' goals on energy, tax cuts, border funding, and more.
We're going to get the economy going. We're going to get back to American energy dominance in this bill. Yep. And we're going to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state.
All this is paired with steep spending cuts, $2 trillion in spending cuts over 10 years. Democrats are sounding the alarm.
They want to jam $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts down the throats of the American people to benefit their billionaire donors and wealthy corporations, and at the same time, they want to stick everyday Americans with the bill by ending Medicaid as we know it.
Speaker Johnson has denied slashing benefits, but says cuts to waste are on the table. Even so, the speaker is having a tough time keeping his conference in line. 8 Republicans who represent Hispanic populations warned Johnson against putting safety net programs on the cutting board, while Victoria Spartz already said she's an outright no, though for different reasons. She wrote on X, quote, roughly 85% of spending is not ever even looked at by Congress. Convenient if you would like to hide waste, fraud, and abuse. Johnson's razor-thin margin means one Republican could tank the measure. That's why he's pushing for one bill instead of the two-step approach that the Senate is already on track to pass.
It's going to be a big, beautiful bill, and it has to be by necessity because that gives us the highest probability of success, remembering that I have a small margin in the House. I have one vote for much of this.
I think it'd have a hard time in the Senate, but nobody's pulling for the House more than I am because they can pass one big, beautiful bill that meets their priorities, that makes things so much easier. If they can't, then we need to move forward on security component.
Senate Republicans are already a step ahead of the House. Last week, they passed their budget resolution and are now on track to getting their final bill to the finish line. House Republicans, meanwhile, are racing to catch up and take the lead. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
New York City is set to close its Central Migrant Processing Center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. Mayor Eric Adams making this announcement this morning. The hotel closed in 2020 and then reopened as an intake facility for migrants entering the U.S. via the southern border from 2021 onwards. The city is expected to end migrant processing operations at the hotel in June. The mayor's office says 53 migrant shelters will have closed by then. The hotel facility processed 75% of the 232,000 migrants entering the city from 2023 on. It started processing migrants at the height of the city's migrant crisis, with over 4,000 people per week. Adams says that number is now 350 per week. His office says 80% of migrants that sought care with the city have taken the next steps on their journey towards self-sufficiency. All of this signals the end of the city's migrant crisis, which likely won't pick up again anytime soon. DHS says daily border crossings are down 93% since President Trump took office in January. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced a state task force today, modeled after President Trump and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. He described how the new group will streamline government in the Sunshine State.
But as part of our DOGE initiative, our state task force will look into local government expenditures by utilizing publicly available county and municipal spending records so that we're able to provide this information in a digestible way for the taxpayers throughout the state of Florida. I am also going to request, and I've spoken with the leaders of both chambers, Speaker Perez and President Albritton, about legislation to be able to give the DOGE team enforcement power so that these municipalities and counties have to comply with these audits.
DeSantis said the task force will operate for 1 year. Now, the Republican governor touted his state's record on X, writing, quote, Florida was Doge before Doge was cool. DeSantis is also looking to cut more than 700 government jobs while increasing staff for law enforcement. The governor added that the task force is aiming to eliminate dozens of government boards and commissions. A federal judge today is set to consider a request by the Associated Press. The news agency wants full access for its journalists restored. The Trump administration barred them from the Oval Office and Air Force One for continuing to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of Mexico rather than as the Gulf of America in its coverage. The AP sued 3 senior Trump aides on Friday. The news agency argues that the decision to block its reporters from the Oval Office violates First Amendment protections. That's by trying to dictate the language they use in reporting the news. White House spokesman Stephen Chung called the lawsuit a blatant PR stunt. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says the administration believes its position is correct. Levitt is one of the 3 officials named as defendants in the lawsuit. Apple has announced that it plans to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the course of the next 4 years. Here's that story.
The money will fund a giant factory in Texas for artificial intelligence servers and 20,000 research and development jobs across the country in that time. It is also expected to cover spending on everything from purchases from U.S. suppliers to filming of television shows and movies for its Apple TV Plus service. Apple declined to say how much of the figure it was already planning to spend in the country. The move comes after media reports that Apple CEO Tim Cook met President Donald Trump last week. Many of Apple's products that are assembled in China could face 10% tariffs imposed by Trump earlier this month, though the iPhone maker had secured some waivers from China tariffs in the first Trump administration. Apple made a similar announcement about its U.S. spending plans in 2018 during the first Trump administration. Trump, in a Truth Social post, thanked Apple and Cook, saying the move reflected the company's faith in his administration. Shares of Apple were up fractionally in late morning trading.
Starbucks announced job cuts today. CEO Brian Niccol said Starbucks will be laying off over 1,100 corporate workers as it tries to turn around its business. The company will also be eliminating several hundred open and unfilled positions. In addition, the coffee chain is going to eliminate about 30% of its food and beverage offerings over the next few months, this in order to streamline things. Some of Starbucks' Frappuccino blended drinks, its Royal English breakfast latte, and white hot chocolate will all be among the items cut, as they're said to be too complex to make and are unpopular with customers. Coming up next, French President Emmanuel Macron is visiting the White House today. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set for a visit on Thursday. We'll be talking to a former ambassador about European-American relations. And Germany's Christian Democratic Union wins the election. The leader of the party invites Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit the country. We'll be right back.
Right now at Mathis Home, buy one La-Z-Boy recliner, get the second one free. That's right, buy one recliner, get the matching recliner absolutely free. Recliner pairs start at just $7.99. It's your chance to save on the handcrafted quality and comfort that La-Z-Boy is famous for. And get 2 great chairs for one low price. They're all in stock now with easy financing and fast free delivery. Buy one, get one free on La-Z-Boy recliners, only at Mathis Home.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
Where did the time go? I don't know how I got here. Ooh,
done the hard part. You quit smoking. Now do the easy part and get scanned for lung cancer. If you smoked, you may still be at risk, but early detection could save your life. Talk to your doctor and learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Welcome back to Newsroom. President Donald Trump is meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron today. In fact, we're waiting for their press conference, which should be happening soon. Now, this comes just before Trump is also set to meet with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday. We're at a crossroads right now as we wait to see how U.S.-Europe relations will change as debate continues surrounding NATO and the Russia-Ukraine war. Joining us now to discuss is Jim Gilmore, the former governor of Virginia and a former U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Thanks for joining us again. I want to ask you, how strong of a position right now are Starmer and Macron in to be negotiating with Trump?
Well, I think that they're key allies of the United States. I think we're in a global war right now that's not going to be deterred. And we're going to need the support of the British and the French in this ongoing conflict. I don't know how strong they are at this point. Frankly, I think that the whole point of the Trump policy is to make them stronger and to, I'm sorry, and to make them gain strength for themselves. I'm sorry, I can't speak.
No worries, Jim. Take your time. Well, then you take a moment there. Let me ask you this question then. Macron, we've heard him say that if Trump makes a deal in Russia's favor, that would show American weakness to Iran and to China. Is that how you see it? I mean, wouldn't Washington's attempts to pull Russia away from China and create a stronger relationship between the West with Russia, wouldn't that be more beneficial to the Western world?
Yeah, yes, it would be, but I'm not sure that that's possible. Right now, I believe that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea have made a determination that they want to change the way that international relations work. So it'd be nice if we could separate China and Russia, but I don't think that's in the cards. What I do think is important is that we maintain our alliances in Europe. The alliances in Europe and the independence of Europe is essential to the existence of the United States of America, in my view. Now, that doesn't mean that the U.S. taxpayer has to stand aside and let the Europeans simply say, well, if you want our alliance, you have to carry the whole weight. Trump is right about this. The Europeans have got to build up their military abilities, their scientific abilities, and become better partners of the United States. And I think that's President Trump's message.
Building off of that, Jim, Macron and Starmer, they're both expected to try and convince Trump to include Europe and Ukraine in those ceasefire talks with Russia. What would EU leaders specifically push for if they were to be given a seat at that table?
Well, I think that they would say that their national security is at stake as much as anybody else. In fact, maybe more so. If Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he at that point is in a position to intimidate Europe and to affect the politics of Europe. He wouldn't necessarily have to invade Eastern or Western Europe. He could simply influence their politics. But frankly, I'm not so sure how important it is for the Europeans to be at that table. I think that they're in a position to negotiate independently, frankly. I'm not even sure Ukraine ought to be at the table. But that's the decision that the Europeans and the Ukrainians ought to make. I think that President Trump and his team ought to have an opportunity to talk over things. But the Americans need to understand that the Europeans will look after themselves the same way Ukraine will.
But Jim, you say Europe should negotiate separately or independently. What would that look like? Talk us through that.
Oh, well, I'm not sure that we're there yet. I will say this. President Trump has shaken up the bag. He's the one that actually has got this thing off dead center. He's the one that's beginning to have the discussions and the negotiations. And I think that's a very positive thing. I think that one thing Trump is he's creative. He takes initiative. He's assertive. These things are good. And once you get to the bargaining table, people can find out what's going on. But you're not in trouble until you surrender. And I hope and don't expect that President Trump's going to surrender. I think he saw the Afghan example with President Biden. I don't think he wants to repeat that. And personally, I believe that the success of Ukraine is essential to the safety of Europe and thus to the United States. But that's something they're going to be talking about privately. But the Europeans, they have a free hand here. And the election in Germany demonstrates that. The new chancellor of Germany has indicated he wants to be more independent of the United States. Well, frankly, then Germany needs to step up to the plate and begin to prepare to protect their allies and to play a leading role in Europe. That's what they need to do, not just rely on the United States.
And we'll come back to the Germany election in just a moment. But Trump has been pushing, as we've been seeing, for European countries to share more of the burden in European security, become more independent with their defense. How do you expect Starmer and Macron to demonstrate that this week to Trump?
Well, let's see what they bring to the table with Trump. At least they're coming over here to talk to Trump, which I think is the right thing to do. I don't know what they're going to bring in their briefcases, but I think it's a non-starter unless they're asserting that they're prepared to be equal partners and really get out there and to build something in terms of their own safety and security, their own military. One thing I have noticed is that the British are stepping forward very strongly and basically saying that they'd be prepared to put in troops as necessary, that they're very supportive of Ukraine. And I think that they're going to have that conversation with President Trump and try to determine Trump's policy. We'll see what they do when they get here. I think it's a very positive thing that Macron and Starmer are coming to talk to Trump because they're essential allies.
Absolutely. Now, when we speak of defense, of course, we can't forget about NATO. Zelensky, we saw, he said he'd be willing to step down in exchange for peace or NATO membership for Ukraine. What kind of a NATO might we be seeing by the time the June NATO summit rolls around?
Well, I believe that one of the essential goals for President Putin of Russia is the destruction of NATO. I think that what his plans are, which is the recreation of the old Russian Empire, the biggest block to that is NATO. It affects the Baltics. It affects all the countries of Western Europe in a very essential way. What are we going to see? Well, I think we're going to see a stronger NATO. I think that NATO is stronger after President Trump's initiatives. He has required the Europeans to actually pay attention to NATO. So we'll see what happens there. Now, the new German chancellor has, thrown a little dust on NATO and said, well, we're going to have to act, on our own with a new organization. Well, that's fine. Let him move forward. But I don't think NATO is going anywhere personally.
And before we go here, I want to go back to Germany for a second. We did see Friedrich Merz, whose party just won that election. Now, you're saying he wants more independence on his continent, but he's also said of the Trump administration that Trump and his team mostly doesn't care about the fate of Europe one way or another. What do you make of that?
I think that he's drawing conclusions based upon a lot of the comments that were made in the Munich conference a couple of weeks ago. Vance certainly made a very powerful speech that lectured the Europeans. Much more important was Pete Hegseth that basically set down 3 or 4 conditions that were pretty bad for Ukraine. But look at that. Isn't that interesting? The election has now been held and the new German chancellor is saying, wait a minute here. We Europeans have got to protect our own selves. We have to look for our own security. We have to do some important things. I'd be very surprised if in the long run or the short run, Germany separates from the United States. There's been decades and decades and decades since World War II union and close cooperation between Germany and the United States. In fact, the United States was very responsible for the reunification of Germany. So, but I think that what he's doing is he's expressing a desire for Germany to step up and do their jobs. And I think that's entirely because of Trump's pushing. Now, if on the other hand, Trump decides for some reason he wants to fold to Putin, which I don't think that's been declared yet, that, in my opinion, that would not be good. And I would counsel the president differently if I had that opportunity.
Absolutely. And we're just waiting on that press conference between Macron and Trump. I'm sure a lot more will be clear after that. Jim Gilmore, former U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, thank you.
Thank you for that chance to be on NTD.
The leader of Germany's Christian Democratic Union, Friedrich Merz, said today that he invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit Germany. He said he would find a way for Netanyahu to do so without being arrested under a warrant by the International Criminal Court.
We did indeed speak on the phone last night. He called me, congratulated me. We know each other well. And I also told him that we should see each other soon after the formation of the government. And in case he plans a visit to Germany, I assured him that we will find ways for him to visit Germany and also leave again without being arrested in Germany. I think it's a very far-fetched idea that an Israeli prime minister can't visit the Federal Republic of Germany. He will be able to visit Germany.
The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu over the war in Gaza, and Germany is a signatory to the founding treaty of the court. The German CDU leader also addressed a question on President Trump and relationships with the U.S. Moving on now, the leader of the Nationalist Alternative for Germany called her party's second-place showing historic. The AfD's 20% score marked the first time since World War II that a nationalist party took second place in a national election.
Firewalls are undemocratic, and there should be no firewalls at all.
Elon Musk saying congratulations to you. How would you like to work together with the Trump administration?
To be a very good partner and to have serious and proper conversation with our U.S. American partner. And, for us, very good international relationships are a precondition for a good international dialogue.
The Nationalist Alternative for Germany and the Left Party jointly secured 1/3 of seats in the new parliament. That's enough seats to veto constitutional changes. Both the AfD and the Left oppose, for example, military aid to Ukraine. With their newfound strength in the Bundestag lower house, they could veto increased defense contributions. The Green Party came in 4th place. Party head Robert Habeck called the result disappointing. He says he will no longer take a leading role in his party. Coming up, Swiss politicians congratulate Shenyang Performing Arts on 4 sold-out performances in the city of Lausanne, inspiring them with what they describe as a message of truth and freedom. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, I have an important message about security. Write down the number on your screen so you can call when I finish. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. This is a lock for your life insurance, a rate lock that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. But be careful. Many policies you see do not have one. But you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. Call this number to learn more. This plan was designed with a rate lock for people on a fixed income who want life insurance that fits their budget and is simple to get. Coverage options start at $9.95 a month, less than 35 cents a day. Act now, and your rate will be locked in for life. It will never increase, guaranteed. This is lifelong coverage that can never be canceled as long as you pay your premiums, guaranteed. And your acceptance is guaranteed, with no health questions. You cannot be turned down because of your health. Call for your information kit and read about this rate lock for yourself. You'll also get a free beneficiary planner. Both are free with no obligation. Don't miss out. Call for information, then decide. Read about the 30-day 100% money-back guarantee. Don't wait. Call this number now.
Call now and you'll also get this free beneficiary planner. Use this valuable guide to record important information and your final wishes, and it's yours free just for calling. So don't wait. Call 1-800-357-4821 for your free information. That's 1-800-357-4821. There's no risk or obligation. That number again is 1-800-357-4821. That's 1-800-357-4821. 1-800-357-4821. Call now.
If you love them enough to crawl into a play place to get them to come down, then then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the-right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Welcome back to Newsroom. President Donald Trump is now holding a press conference with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. It's happening right now. Let's tune in.
The First and Second World Wars, our citizens shed blood together on the battlefields of Europe. And I'll never forget joining President Macron 6 years ago on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was some day. The purpose of our meeting today is to end another battle, a really horrible one, a war, something that we haven't seen since the Second World War, that is ravaging European soil, the deadliest and most destructive conflict that one can imagine. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellite photos and lots of other photos, and it's a horrible thing that's happening. Thousands of people are dying a week. This very day is the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, which would never have happened if I was president. That was not going to happen. The horrors of this gruesome and bloody war can scarcely be overestimated. Hundreds of thousands of people, Russians and Ukrainians in particular, have needlessly died. An entire generation of Ukrainians and Russian men has been decimated. 1,000-year-old cities have been turned into rubble. Those beautiful spires that you used to see there, they were most beautiful in the world, they say, are lying in heaps of rubble, blasted to smithereens. It's time to end this bloodletting and restore peace, and I think we're going to do it. We've had some great conversations, including with Russia. Since my return to the White House, we've made more progress toward that goal in 1 month than occurred in the past 3 years. And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff conducted successful talks in Saudi Arabia with the delegation from Russia, and I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the King and Mohammed. Great people. They're really working hard to get this done. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere because he's been very much involved right from the beginning in trying to get it over with, and we're going to get it done. I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important issues. Chief among them is this is the right time. It may be the only time. You know, that's a very interesting and horrible situation, and that could evolve into a third world war. We're not going to let that happen. Should have never started, but it did. And what a mess. What a horrible, bloody mess. I'm also pleased that President Macron agrees that the cost and burden of securing the peace must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States. And Europe must take that central role in assuring long-term security of Ukraine, which they want to do. And that's not a very big step. The big step is what's going to happen over the next few weeks. The United States has put up far more aid for Ukraine than any other nation. Hundreds of billions of dollars. We've spent more than $300 billion, and Europe has spent about $100 billion. That's a big difference, and at some point we should equalize. But hopefully we won't have to worry about that. We have other things happening that maybe take that out of the realm of necessity. And while we've given vast amounts of military aid and money in form of grants, much of Europe's contribution has been economic relief structured as loans for which they'll be repaid. Like the Europeans, I believe that taxpayers in the United States also deserve to recoup the colossal amounts of money that we've sent. The previous administration never even thought of that. They didn't think of a lot of things, like why did they let it start in the first place? That is why we must have an agreement with Ukraine on critical minerals and rare earths and various other things is security. And I think that that's happening. I think we've made a lot of progress. I had a report just given to me before walking in that we've made, Emmanuel, a great deal of progress toward getting that. I've been elected by the American people to restore common sense to Washington and indeed to the world. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace. My administration is making a decisive break with the foreign policy failures of the past administration and, frankly, the past. I ran against a very foolish foreign policy establishment, and their recklessness has led to the death of many, many people. Under our administration, we're forging a new path that promotes peace around the world. And when I left office for the first administration, first term, we had no wars, we had no problems. We didn't have October 7th with Israel. We didn't have Russia and Ukraine going at it. We didn't have the problems in other parts of the Middle East. We didn't have inflation. It was a whole different world. You know what else we didn't have? Millions of people pouring through our borders, many of them criminals released from other nations and put right into our land, murderers and drug dealers, gangs. We didn't have any of that. It's a different time, but now we have it and we're fixing it. We'll fix it all up. We'll get it done as quickly as possible. And we've made a great deal of progress. People are saying it was the best month for a president in our country's history. I hope that's right, but I feel it's right. We've done a lot of things in a very short period of time, 4 weeks. As I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy, however, will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. I want to bring peace, not war. I thank President Macron for joining us today in this urgent work we're doing. We have some wonderful people up front right here that have worked so hard. Steve Witkoff, thank you very much. And Michael Waltz, thank you. Scott, thank you very much, and JD, thank you. They've really done a job. They worked very hard. It's a real passion to get this war ended. And I'd like to now invite Emmanuel to say a few words, and then we'll take questions. And again, Emmanuel, it's a great honor to have you with us at the White House. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Donald. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, je vais dire quelques.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be saying a few words in French. Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear Donald, for your hospitality and for this visit. As you mentioned, we have had the opportunity to meet over the past few years. Since your first term, we've been able to discuss matters in Paris and also here at the White House, and it has always been a great joy to do that, and I would like to commend you. And thank you, Mr. President, for extending this friendship to France and taking part in the ceremony at Notre Dame that you mentioned before. It was a great honor for the French people to reopen the cathedral to the rest of the world, and your presence was a testament to that friendship. As the President said, this friendship dates back to the Revolutionary War, since the beginning of the United States. And whenever we've needed to, we've been able to come together and be on the right side. We've been able to be united to defend peace and sovereignty, namely in the two world wars that marked the 20th century, from Lafayette to Pershing and to the many Americans who landed on Omaha Beach. And we spoke earlier before, and you mentioned that one of those gentlemen was able to visit you here, one of the veterans. This is part of history which puts us in the world that we are in today. And as the President just said, there are many challenges in this world. And over the past few days, we have one main objective, which is the geopolitical situation. Mr. President, I really wish to thank you for making changes to your schedule to meet with us so quickly. I think we've made very substantive steps forward during our discussions, and this is a major step in what we're experiencing today. We had a video conference with all of the G7 leaders, which was an opportunity for us to discuss this matter 3 days after the Russian war in Ukraine and to express our support for President Zelensky to the Ukrainian people, but also to speak and share about our desire for a lasting peace. This is what we have spoken about very forcibly over the past few weeks. We thought that this war was only going to last a few weeks when it broke out in 2022. We admire greatly the courage of the Ukrainian people. And Mr. President, I wish to thank you for this. You mentioned that there are responsibilities on Europe's side, and indeed, we have invested $128 billion in aid to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. Ukraine has been able to hold the front of our collective security. It's fought over these past few years for its independence and for its sovereignty, but also for our collective security, because I think that no one in this room wants to live in a world where it's the law of the strongest and international borders can be violated from one day to the next by anyone. Over the past few hours, and as you mentioned this, Mr. President, we've been able to see a few things take shape. First of all, allow me to commend you on your decision to work with President Zelensky and to conclude this agreement that's so important for the U.S. and Ukraine on rare earths, critical minerals, but also having substantive conversations with President Zelensky during this key phase of achieving this deal, which is a major commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's very commendable. We also have a shared desire to build peace. We will have this responsibility. This is 10 years after the war started in Crimea, and then we saw the events in the Donbas region and along the northern part of the country. We want to save lives. We want to bring prisoners back and bring back families and children, because there's also humanitarian tragedy affecting the Ukrainian people. We had lengthy discussions with the president, and we spoke about our desire to bring an end to conflicts, to have a truce that is measurable, verifiable, and that enables negotiation of a lasting peace, where we will discuss not only Ukraine's reconstruction, its territories, but also the security guarantees, meaning maintaining peace over the long term. As I said to the president, we've experienced peace accords that were only ceasefires without ensuring security guarantees, Minsk I and II. And we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I know that the president has expressed the desire to be a player for peace in the region. I've spoken with some 30 European leaders and allies in recent days. We want to bring together these allies, and share the same vision. This peace must not mean a surrender of Ukraine. It must not mean a ceasefire without guarantees. This peace must allow for Ukrainian sovereignty and allow Ukraine to negotiate with other stakeholders regarding the issues it affects. But it is also a country in which we need to shoulder our responsibilities so that we ensure security and stability for Ukraine and for the entire region. And for us Europeans, this is an existential issue. We also spoke about these issues at length with the president. We've worked with President Zelensky and gotten to some of the details of the various phases of the negotiation. And we've also been able to speak about some of this work with our British partners to talk about deployments of peace forces on Ukrainian soil, which are part of these security guarantees. Other countries are ready to join in this effort. Solidarity and support from the U.S. will be crucial to this, and I thank you, Mr. President, for beginning to work with us on this issue and the agreement that you are preparing to sign with Ukraine and with all of these discussions we've had are very solid guarantees that we are understood and that we have the same wish, peace as soon as possible, lasting, solid peace for everyone. And the renewal of an international situation where we are all able to shoulder our responsibilities, Europeans shouldering their responsibilities alongside their American allies who will shoulder their own responsibilities. I also wanted to be very clear, Mr. President, about Europe's commitment. We have committed to building a lasting peace. As Europeans, we have committed to being stakeholders in these security guarantees. And we are also well aware that Europeans need to do more for security in Europe, for defense in Europe, and to more fairly share the security burden that your country's been carrying for so many years. Mr. President, you know how much friendship I show towards you and I have towards you since your first term. Europe is very clear-eyed about this. We know what we need to do as Europeans, given the threats surrounding us and the responsibilities that we must shoulder. We spoke about the Versailles Agenda, which allowed the Europeans to take a historic step and increase their investments. Europeans are ready to do even more and to go even farther. And several leaders said that to me before I came here to meet you. Mr. President, dear Donald, you spoke about this peace through strength. We fully share that because we must recognize the sacrifices made by the Ukrainian people and what we owe to them. The President and I also spoke about economic matters and our desire to see more prosperity in the United States and in Europe. We had discussions which will be carried on by our teams, our ministers and secretaries, to flesh out some of those ideas. But the idea is to have fair competition and no bias within competition between our industries. Now, the American and European economies are extremely intertwined. Some 1.5 billion in trade, trillion rather, in goods and services, and I know you've spoken about wanting to look at the balance of payments. We also have a trade deficit, and I know that we need to look not only at goods, but also digital items and goods which you export. And we want to make a sincere commitment towards fair competition where we have smooth trade and more investments. You already invest a great deal in France, and France is the fifth largest investor in the United States. And I would like to recognize here all of the American investors who announced investments, some $120 billion that were announced at the AI summit. This is our wish. We want to have more prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. We have a shared agenda in that regard. We also spoke about the Middle East, among other subjects. And here again, we have the same desire. We don't want to see Iran obtain nuclear weapons. We don't want, or rather, we want an approach with partners in the region that we can trust. Given Iran's nuclear activities, we want to limit its ballistic capabilities and avoid any type of regional destabilization. With respect to Syria and Iraq, we also share the same desire. We don't want to see Islamic terrorist groups resume any of their activities because for some time our armies have very bravely been engaged in the Gulf, as you have led, and contributions have been significant and helped stability in the region. And I say this with great sincerity. France was affected by a terrorist attack in 2015, which was linked to the terrorist activity in Syria. And we are in that region at your side to work for more security. Ladies and gentlemen, we had extremely productive discussions this morning during the conference, and we spoke with our ministers and counselors and advisors. And I wish to say, after speaking with President Trump, I fully believe that there is a path forward. We share the same beliefs. We know what work needs to be done, and in the weeks to come, we will work on that. Our teams will come together in various formats to make sure that we have this solid, lasting peace with great strength. Mr. President, thank you so much for welcoming me here today. Thank you so much for these productive discussions and for your commitment. Thank you, dear Donald.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Okay, thank you very much. Brian, would you like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Welcome, President Trump. I just want to touch upon real quickly the Harvard poll that came out that had, thank you very much, the Harvard poll that came out had you up 9+ points, and all of your agenda that you ran on, you're accomplishing that. You got the support of the American people, including stopping the war in Ukraine. If you can comment on the latest Harvard poll, I appreciate that.
Well, I was honored by it. It was a big poll, and it's usually a poll that leans on the other side of things, the other side of the world, so to speak. But the Harvard poll is a respected poll, and it has us not only leading, but leading by a lot, and leading on every single issue that we've talked about. And as I said, we've become the party of common sense, and I think that's a very important element now, common sense, because what's happening in the world and even in this country, some of the things that took place, many of them are now canceled, and the rest are being canceled as we speak. But we've moved very rapidly and I think very effectively. So I was honored by that poll. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Mr. President, you said before that you would like to see Russia.
Yes. Go ahead.
When you're meeting in Saudi Arabia with President Putin, will that happen regardless of any progress on the Ukrainian file?
Yeah, I think the meeting in Saudi Arabia was a fantastic one. We met with the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic young guy. He's young, but with great imagination and tremendously respected all over the world. And he goes right to the king, and the king is incredible. Gotten to be friends with both of them very much, and they want to see this ended, and they're going all out to make sure that it is ended. I think Russia, likewise, I've spoken to President Putin, and my people are dealing with him constantly, and his people in particular. And they want to do something. I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals. And I know when somebody wants to make it and when somebody doesn't. I will say this, before I came here, there was no communication with Russia whatsoever, and Russia wasn't answering calls. They were not talking to anybody. They wouldn't talk to anybody, and people sort of accepted that as being that they want to go forward and just keep going without stop. But when I got here, one of the first calls I made was to President Putin, and we were treated with great respect, and they want to end this war. So that's a big thing, because I didn't know if I could say that, but it's a big thing. They want to do it, and the group in the front row that I introduced, they're all very active in it, and we're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement. I'd like to go directly to an agreement, but ceasefire will always happen a little bit quicker. And every day you're saving thousands, or at least hundreds, but thousands in some cases, lives. So we want to see if we can get that done very quickly. Yes, for the president, please.
Thank you. Correspondent based in Paris. Question for both of you, actually. Mr. Macron, you were one of the last Western leaders to speak to Putin before Ukraine's invasion. What advice, what recommendation could you make to President Trump to make sure that this time you can get strong enough guarantees from Putin to get a peace deal that lasts this time? And Mr. President Trump, what makes you think you can trust Putin in those negotiations? Thank you.
Look, I will never give any advice to President Trump. We have friendly and trustful discussion, but my experience with President Putin is the following. Number one, I always think it's good to have discussion with other leaders, and especially when you disagree. I stopped my discussion with President Putin after Bucha and the war crimes because I considered that, we had nothing to get from him in that time. Now this is a chance, there is a big change because there is a new US administration. So this is a new context. So there is good reason for President Trump to re-engage with President Putin. But my experience is the following, and I shared it with President Trump and the team. In 2014, our predecessors negotiated peace with President Putin. But because of the lack of guarantees, and especially security guarantees, President Putin violated this peace. And I had several discussions, especially at the beginning of 2022, several times, 7 hours with President Putin, 15 days before launching of the attack. He denied everything, but we didn't have security guarantees. So this is why being strong and having deterrence capacities is the only way to be sure it will be respected. And I insisted on that, and this is why I believe that the US has the capacity to do so. And this is why I think we should never say, I will never send any boots on the ground, because you give a blank check to violate any type of commitment. So I think it's good to have discussion. I think it's useful to have negotiation. I think it's super important to go to the peace. But my strong point was to say, let's try to get something first which can be assessed, checked and verified. And let's be sure that we build sufficient guarantees on the short run. And this is where we are ready to be engaged. As for France, a lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged. But we do need this American backup, because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees. And this is our collective deterrence capacity. And I have the feeling that the President has this capacity.
I think it's very much to the benefit of Russia to make a deal. And I feel that we'll do that. It is what it is. Again, it's a war that should have never been started. It's a war that would not have been started if I were president. But it did start, and it's at a terrible level where cities are burned down and shot down to the ground. It looks like demolition sites, a whole big pile of demolition sites, and we got to get it stopped. Too many people, too much agony. The whole culture is destroyed when you rip down some of those ancient, really ancient or near ancient buildings. It's so sad to see, but I think it's very much to the benefit of this tremendous distrust on both sides. That's why it's good that I'm coming in now, but I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal. Maybe wrong, but I believe he wants to make a deal. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Next week, there's a key deadline for your Canada and Mexico tariffs.
Pour les droits.
I believe those countries have done enough on the border to stop those from taking effect. And for President Macron, I'm wondering if you believe that this critical minerals deal with Ukraine represents a de facto security guarantee by the United States, since the U.S. would have an interest in protecting those reserves in Ukraine. Thank you.
We're on time with the tariffs, and it seems like that's moving along very rapidly. We've been mistreated very badly by many countries, not just Canada and Mexico. We've been taken advantage of. We were led by, in some cases, fools, because anybody that would sign documents like they signed, where they were able to take advantage of the American people, like has happened over the last long period of time, except for a little 4-year period that took place 4 years ago. But anybody that would agree to allow this to happen to our country should be ashamed of themselves. No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule. This is an abuse that took place for many, many years. And I'm not even blaming the other countries that did this. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. I mean, you know, who can blame them if they made these great deals with the United States, took advantage of the United States on manufacturing, on just about everything. Every aspect that you can imagine, they took advantage of. I look at some of these agreements, I'd read them at night, and I'd say, who would ever sign a thing like this? So the tariffs will go forward, yes, and we're going to make up a lot of territory. All we want is reciprocal. We want reciprocity. We want to have the same. So if somebody charges us, we charge them. It's very simple, but it'll be very good for our country. Our country will be extremely liquid and rich again. Plus, we're doing other things, as you know. We're finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse at levels that nobody thought possible. You're seeing what's going on. And that was also part of the Harvard poll. Do you agree with what President Trump is doing with Elon and others that are looking for the waste, fraud, and abuse? And the numbers were staggering. It was like 70% to 2%. Everybody wants to find out. They don't like it. And, you know, the radical left or whoever it may be starts screaming about the Constitution, but it has nothing to do with the Constitution. It has to do with fairness to this country. It has to do with being ripped off. And when you read the things that all of these billions, and I mean many billions, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on, that's all you have to do is stand up here and read them. I could stand up all day and read the kind of things where we're spending all of this money. The good news is that when you think of how rich a nation we can be when we get rid of this, you know, sometimes you'll buy a company and you'll see it was really well run. They accounted for every penny. Well, not much you can do there. You got yourself a bad deal. This one is the exact opposite. Tremendous fraud, tremendous waste. And when you think of what it is, you know, Elon uses an expression, caring. If we had people that cared, just cared a little bit when they did contracts, when they negotiated with outside vendors on behalf of the United States. That's what I'm doing now. I'm negotiating for the people of the United States. So we're doing a great job of it. I will say we found it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud and abuse. Thank you. Please.
Look, I think this discussion is a very important one. First, because it's important for the US, and it will be a good occasion for a first very important meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. Second, I think there is a lot of economic upside on both sides. And third, de facto, there is a recognition of Ukrainian sovereignty, a recognition of the Ukrainian interests, and this is de facto a very important alignment of interests. Now, the security guarantees will be negotiated in due time in a full-fledged package of a peace security. But this peace, as it is now written and negotiated, and as this meeting is scheduled, is an important step forward, full-fledged peace agreement.
Monsieur le Président Trump.
President Trump, President Macron.
To make a deal with Putin. So when you do a deal, it's a win-win deal. What are you giving to him and what is he going to give you to America? And I was impressed by the way you referred to Notre Dame and that you were impressed by the reconstruction of Notre Dame. A lot of Americans have sent money to Paris to participate to the reconstruction of Notre Dame. As a president of the United States, are you going to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine? Et Monsieur le Président Macron?
President Macron, what for you is the main area of progress in your meeting with President Trump? Can you confirm that there is an agreement to send European peacekeeping troops? Will France participate in that? How many troops? What would they be doing? Would this represent a great danger to send French and European troops to Ukraine?
Well, I guess it's a little strange question because you ask whether or not we're going to, on behalf of the United States, contribute to Ukraine. I mean, we're in there for about $350 billion. I think that's a pretty big contribution. I do appreciate the first part of your question, however, because I think they've done an incredible job with the Cathedral of Notre Dame. I think the president has done. I know he headed it up, and I know how hard he worked, and it took a period of time, but really not a long period of time, considering what that was, so delicate, so beautiful. And I was there, and I saw the work, and I'm very good at construction. I know good construction. I know bad construction. They did a beautiful job, and this man has to be given a lot of credit for that. It's an incredible cathedral. Most people thought it couldn't be saved, and if it was, it would have to be built in a different form, and we didn't want to see a different form. We wanted to see the same form that you built. So I just want to congratulate you. That was an amazing job. I don't think you've gotten enough credit for it. Someday you will. Someday you will.
Thank you, Donald. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. To go back to your question, today's discussion showed several areas of progress. First, we have been working a great deal with President Zelensky to have a proposal that's acceptable to Ukraine. President Trump has confirmed that he will be meeting with President Zelensky very soon to finalize the agreement on critical minerals and rare earths and to speak together about that matter. That's a very important step forward. The second thing is that during our discussions, we were able to go into some of the details about the proposal that we have just made to have a truce, a peace, and be able to measure that and then structure our discussions on that basis. France and several other European countries, along with Ukraine, are hard at work to build this lasting peace with very specific points, including security guarantees, the territories that belong to Ukraine, the issue of reconstruction, the economy, and critical minerals. We've been able to go into the details of those proposals. The third area of progress, which really mark a turning point, is the fact that we were able to talk about the details of the security guarantees. And the president has shown this over the past few days, and he said so a moment ago. We want peace. He wants peace. We want peace swiftly, but we don't want an agreement that is weak. The fact that there are Europeans that are ready to engage to provide for these security guarantees. And now there's a clear American message that the U.S., as an ally, is ready to provide that solidarity for that approach. That's a turning point, in my view. And that is one of the great areas of progress that we've made during this trip and during this discussion. When it comes to troops, in the past, a year ago specifically, we saw a reason to talk about sending troops for strategic regions. Today, when we talk about troops, we're talking about sending them in after we've negotiated a lasting peace. And once we have that solid, lasting peace, that's part of an agreement signed by Ukraine, signed by Russia, and for which we will provide the guarantees, then at that point, and recently France has worked with the UK to provide its contributions. We've worked on plans. We've worked with our militaries not to go to the front lines, not to go into occupied territories, but as a show of support to show that we have a negotiated peace signed by both sides, and that is a peace we will preserve. So these would be peaceful deployments of troops, not for combat. These would be deployments of an assurance force. They would be limited, but they show solidarity. I've also spoken with all of our allies, and there are European and non-European allies who are ready and willing to take part in that effort. Countries have helped Ukraine maintain its military capabilities in terms of the number of soldiers it has, equipment, whereas others have provided logistical support on the ground. The question is whether or in what form the U.S. will contribute. And during our discussions, and during the discussions with Russia, we've understood that this would be acceptable to Russia, and that's a very important area of progress. And that means that in this context, the Europeans will shoulder their part of the burden, their share of the burden. We have a strong alliance that we've built over the decades. We have our solidarity, and we have deterrence capacities. What does it mean? Would it be dangerous? If there is an agreement signed by Ukraine and Russia, thanks to the efforts of President Trump, and if we provide the guarantees and Russia violates the agreement, then it would be in conflict with everyone who is engaged in the peace process. And that is a change. That was something we did not see in the past. That's not what we saw in 2014. So that is the real change that we're marking. We have this deterrence capacity on the American side. We have the capacity for engagement on the European side, and that's something we're going to continue working on together. It's not dangerous, but it's credible. It's less dangerous than things that could happen in the long term. And I think this is what we need to do to ensure security. And I say this very clearly. We're also talking about security for Europeans. I've been saying this for weeks now. If we do not guarantee the security of this territory within Europe, then how can we guarantee our own security for one and all? We live just 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, and the Germans and Polish are even closer. So our collective security is important. We need to answer this call for Europeans to be more engaged, and Americans will be there still in solidarity. Europeans are working for their collective security, but I really think this was a turning point today in our discussions.
Emmanuel, thank you very much. Great job, and it's been wonderful being with you. Say hello to your beautiful wife, and we will see you again soon. We'll be speaking often. We'll get this thing worked out. We're going to get it done. So important, and great job.
Thank you.
Here we go, live from the White House just then. President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron answering reporter questions. A lot to do with the Russia-Ukraine war and those ceasefire talks. All right, when we come back, the Trump administration's new foreign policy targets China's civil-military fusion. That means more restrictions for Chinese and U.S. companies aiming to protect national security. We'll break that all down after the break.
I go by Jackie. I'm 44 years old. I had 3 kids at the time and single mother. I was working 60 hours a week. Still couldn't pay the bills. Skipped meals so that they could eat. It's been hard because one thing falls into place, 10 things fall out of place. You know, I just can't do this alone and make it work.
1 in 5 children face hunger in America, and food costs are rising. But everyone needs nourishing food to thrive. And they can when we work together so our neighbors can feed their families. Call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Together, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks, dedicated volunteers, and the monthly support of people like you, we can fill plates with nutritious food for families across America.
One day my mother came over to my house and said, "There's a meeting at the pantry." I said, "Okay," and I went. There were some ladies in there. They were from the food bank. They asked several questions. Some of those were about me and my story, but it helped me to open up a little bit.
We're getting closer to the day when no one in America faces hunger, but we can't do it without you. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger, from coast to coast and in your own community. And when you give by credit card, we'll send you this exclusive canvas grocery bag to show you are a part of a movement of supporters working together to help end hunger.
I have people that I can trust. I have hope.
Please call now or make your monthly donation at helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over. never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight.
Skylar, come here.
Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. Today marks exactly 3 years since Russia invaded neighboring Ukraine. Now, more than ever, Kyiv wants to strengthen its ties with the West. President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed world leaders in Kyiv today.
Will there be support from America?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hosting world leaders on Monday's 3-year anniversary of the Russian invasion. This comes amid heightened tensions between President Trump and Zelensky. The Ukrainian president highlighted the need for American assistance during his speech in Kyiv on Monday. He also reflected on Ukraine possibly not being able to join Western alliances.
We have to be honest. Ukraine deserves EU membership as well as security guarantees which NATO offers. If NATO membership for Ukraine, for our people, will remain closed, then we have no other choice but to build NATO in Ukraine.
Zelensky touted increasing Ukraine's economy and military force to withstand Russia. This comes after Britain said it might send its forces to Ukraine after the war ends to act as peacekeepers. Zelensky is hosting a number of international officials in Kyiv. Among the attendees was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who was optimistic about Ukraine joining the bloc.
Ukraine merits-based process, if they continue at that speed and at that quality, perhaps they could be earlier than 2030.
There was no immediate sign of U.S. representation at Monday's 3-year anniversary of the war.
Keeping our eye on this conflict, earlier today, Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping affirmed his no-limits friendship with Moscow, this in a phone call with the Russian president. The news was reported by Chinese state-owned media. The talk between China and Russia comes as President Trump pushes for a quick deal to settle the war in Ukraine, citing mounting casualties. Trump said he had very good talks with Putin last week, raising the question of whether the U.S. could draw a wedge between Beijing and Moscow. And China's call with Russia earlier today appeared aimed at dispelling any such prospects. The Chinese regime leader said China and Russia cannot be pulled apart, and they are looking at a long-term partnership. Mutual tensions with the United States have moved China and Russia closer. They first declared a no-limits friendship back in 2022 after Putin deployed troops to invade Ukraine. Over the past decade, the two leaders have met over 40 times. Today marks the 10th day of Pope Francis's hospitalization. He's battling a lung infection that has led to early-stage kidney failure. The Vatican called for nighttime prayers in St. Peter's Square. Now they are inviting the faithful to join in support of the 88-year-old pontiff's recovery. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Pope Francis, 88, remains hospitalized at Gemelli Hospital in Rome, Italy, where he has been since February 14th after a bout of bronchitis worsened. He is battling a severe lung infection, early-stage kidney insufficiency, and double pneumonia. The Holy See press office provided an update stating the Holy Father's clinical condition, despite its severity, has shown a slight improvement. In the evening, he called the parish priest of Gaza to express his paternal closeness. Doctors report no new episodes of respiratory distress, a slight reduction in oxygen support, and improved test results. On Monday, a packed mass was held in the St. John Paul II Chapel at Gemelli Hospital, where doctors, nurses, and visitors gathered in prayer for the Pope's recovery. On Monday, several Catholics gathered at the Agostino Gemelli Polyclinic in Rome, lighting candles and leaving balloons in prayer for Pope Francis. Many expressed their reactions to his hospitalization.
I think he will survive, yes. He has good doctors. And yes, we read the newspapers and hear about him. When he started, he was younger. That was good. And I liked it that he doesn't like the luxury and things like that, that he's with the poor people and he goes to the prisons, and that's good.
I'm worried. He's an old man. It happens to everyone, but I hope he'll move on. He's an important person. Today, in this world full of war and many other bad things, he's the only one who can try to stop it.
While the Pope's condition remains critical, the Vatican says he is awake, in good spirits, and not in pain. Christina Corona, NTD News.
A federal judge has blocked the Department of Government Efficiency from accessing data from the Department of Education and the Office of Personnel Management. A coalition of labor unions argued the agencies wrongly granted DOJ access to personal information of millions of Americans. That information includes social security numbers, dates of birth, home addresses, income and assets, and citizenship status. The Trump administration has argued that blocking DOJ and advisors from accessing that data would impede the president's agenda. Several lawsuits have been filed to block DOJ from accessing government systems. On Friday, a federal judge in New York extended an order blocking access to Treasury Department systems. When we come back, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announces his own DOJ task force to streamline government in the Sunshine State. And New York City is to close the Central Migrant Processing Center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. Check out Mayor Eric Adams' latest move after the break.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore ShenyunCreations.com.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Divinely inspired traditional oil painting inspires compassion. Artwork created in truth and beauty illuminates a path to goodness. Rediscover traditional art, revive classical culture. We warmly invite oil painters from around the world to participate in the 7th NTD International Figure Painting Competition, a celebration of classical realism. Please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Okay, here we go, throw it! Yeah.
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Nice.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced a state task force today, modeled after President Trump and Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. He described how the new group will streamline government in the Sunshine State.
But as part of our DOGE initiative, our state task force will look into local government expenditures by utilizing publicly available county and municipal spending records so that we're able to provide this information in a digestible way for the taxpayers throughout the state of Florida. I am also going to request, and I've spoken with the leaders of both chambers, Speaker Perez and President Albritton, about legislation to be able to give the DOGE team enforcement power so that these municipalities and counties have to comply with these audits.
DeSantis said the task force will operate for 1 year. The Republican governor touted his state's record on X, writing, quote, "Florida was DOGE before DOGE was cool." DeSantis is also looking to cut more than 700 government jobs while increasing staff for law enforcement. The governor also added that the task force is aiming to eliminate dozens of government boards and commissions. Here in New York City, the city is set to close its central migrant processing center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. Mayor Eric Adams made the announcement this morning. The hotel closed in 2020 and then reopened as an intake facility for migrants entering the U.S. via the southern border from 2021 on. The city is expected to end migrant processing operations at the hotel in June. The mayor's office says 53 migrant shelters will have closed by then. The hotel facility processed 75% of the 232,000 migration entering the city from 2023 onward. It started processing migrants at the height of the city's migrant crisis with over 4,000 people per week. Adams says that number is now around 350 per week. His office says 80% of migrants that sought care with the city have taken the next steps on their journey towards self-sufficiency. All of this signals the end of the city's migrant crisis, which likely won't pick up again anytime soon. DHS says daily border crossings are down 93% since President Trump took office in January. A federal judge has temporarily stopped immigration enforcement from operating at places of worship. Today's injunction comes after several religious groups sued the Department of Homeland Security. The plaintiffs include a Georgia-based network of Baptist churches, a Sikh temple in California, and Quakers from Maryland, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. More than 24 Christian and Jewish groups have filed a similar lawsuit in Washington, D.C. Government lawyers say immigration enforcement activities have been allowed in sensitive places, including houses of worship, for decades. The United States imposed a new round of sanctions today focused on Iran's oil industry. The State Department and Department of the Treasury targeted 22 individuals and 13 different vessels. President Donald Trump is looking to squeeze Iran's crude exports in an effort to cut funding for Tehran's nuclear weapons program. Sanctions hit oil brokers in the United Arab Emirates and Hong Kong. Tanker operators and managers in India and China were sanctioned as well for their role in transporting Iranian petroleum. The Treasury also announced additional sanctions against the head of the National Iranian Oil Company and the Iranian Oil Terminals Company. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Iran's oil exports brought in around $53 billion in 2023 alone. The Trump administration just released its new America First investment policy, the entirety of which aims at combating the Chinese regime and its military. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The Trump administration's new foreign investment policy aims at countering China and the regime's military. The White House says it will accommodate foreign investors in proportion to how much they distance themselves from the Chinese Communist Party and other U.S. adversaries, including Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The White House says that the Chinese Communist Party invests in American companies to obtain its technology and equip China's military. These funds go straight to the Chinese military. That's because Chinese law requires Chinese civilian companies to support its military and intelligence. So the Trump administration plans on using, quote, all necessary legal instruments to stop Chinese agents from investing in U.S. technology, healthcare, agriculture, energy, among other areas. Now, there's another side to this. The U.S. also says it will work to prevent U.S. companies from investing in the Chinese military-civil fusion. Now, that means new restrictions are coming to U.S. companies that seek to invest in China's semiconductors, AI, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, among other sectors that could contribute to its military. Now, the U.S. will also fast-track environmental reviews for investments over $1 billion in the U.S., all of which is aimed to increase funding in the U.S. and discourage investments in the CCP. Now, this comes as Chinese leader Xi Jinping spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the phone recently. The U.S. is working to quickly resolve the Russia-Ukraine war, now entering its third year. Russia and Chinese officials say that the two talked about strengthening ties. That's after President Trump spoke with Putin late last week, pledging to strengthen their country's relationship. On the campaign trail, Trump said that U.S. policies of isolating Russia and sanctioning oil following the country's invasion of Ukraine made Russia more reliant on China's economy.
He said the one thing you never want to happen is you never want Russia and China uniting. We united them. Well, I'm going to have to ununite them, and I think I can do that too. And they're natural enemies because Russia has massive land and China needs it. Okay? They need that land. China doesn't have the land for the population.
Now, the U.S.'s work to resolve this war is sparking speculation that the Trump administration may shift its focus to countering threats from communist China. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Shenyun Performing Arts brought audiences on a journey through ancient China as it performed in Lausanne, Switzerland over the weekend. Hear what some politicians had to say about the performances. And NTD has been a media sponsor of Shenyun since 2006. Take a look.
Shenyun wrapped up 4 sold-out performances in Lausanne, Switzerland this week. Among the audience members were many politicians, including the mayor of Miscellaneous, France.
Very fresh, very artistic, and very pleasant. Because it's a moment of relaxation, and it's really beautiful. With all in color, very nice.
The show is magnificent. It's full of color. The dancers are cheerful and smiling, and you can see that a lot of work went into the show. The music is magnificent, having the music live. The opera singer was magnificent. Thank you very much for this beautiful show.
You can see the characters arriving at the bottom of the screen, and immediately the dancers appear. It's absolutely magnificent, and the cohesion, the whole thing is absolutely precise and very well done.
Through classical Chinese dance, Shenyun retells stories and legends based on traditional Chinese culture. Audience members spoke highly of the professionalism and discipline of Shenyun artists.
It's exceptional. Exceptional. The level is very high. The dancers are absolutely magnificent. You get the feeling that they're not only professionals, but people who have trained daily for this show.
I think you can see there's a kindness in their movements. They do it with a smile and they have really worked hard. You can tell there's a unity to the show. And with the orchestra, it's simply magnificent. Thank you so much.
When you see these dancers, you feel that it's really in the tradition of China, 5,000 years of history, and it makes you want to dig deeper, to become more interested in Chinese history. It's extremely interesting to maintain culture, to maintain traditions. It's very important to pass this on to new generations and not lose this culture.
Shenyun also depicts modern stories, including the Chinese regime's persecution of Falun Gong, a meditation practice based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance.
Je pense que c'est le but de Shenyun.
I think it's Shenyang's aim to pass on to future generations, and especially during the performance, to show people like us, who are Swiss or from other countries, to show what's really going on in China in terms of persecution. We didn't talk about organ trafficking, for example. I think it's important to get these things across to the West so that people understand that people are persecuted in China. You have to keep going, persevere, because you mustn't stigmatize or trivialize things. It's very important to continue and carry this message, because it's a message about truth and a message of freedom. And I hope we'll be able to see it soon in Geneva. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you. And congratulations again. It's great. Very, very good.
NTD News, Lausanne, Switzerland.
Coming up, Starlink has a couple of new rivals. A Chinese-backed similar satellite service and an Amazon service are making moves into the high-speed broadband internet space. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
Focus on beauty, showcase nature, share kindness, feel brightness. 2025, the 5th NTD International Photography Competition. Capture the beautiful moments in your eyes. Your works will be showcased in galleries and on multiple online platforms, appreciated and collected. Please visit photo.ntdtv.com.
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Our stories today. Apple announces major investment plans in the U.S. for the next 4 years. It comes after CEO Tim Cook met with President Trump a week ago. Starbucks is laying off over 1,100 corporate workers. Open positions that never found candidates will also be eliminated. And those aren't the only changes. Elon Musk's Starlink has a couple of rivals, a Chinese-backed company offering a similar satellite service, and a project from Amazon, both firms using satellites to deliver high-speed broadband internet. New York City is too close to the Central Migrant Processing Center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. We have more on Mayor Eric Adams' latest move. Chinese medical devices at hospitals all over the U.S. Government agencies finding back doors that could give China control.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for tuning in and good afternoon. President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron just held a joint press conference. Joining us now live from the White House is NTD correspondent Iris Tao. Iris, tell us, what's the main message from the two presidents?
Good afternoon to you as well, Don. So, of course, today's meeting comes on the third anniversary of the war between Russia and Ukraine. The purpose of the meetings between the leaders of the U.S. and France is to help facilitate the progress of bringing an end to this war. And meanwhile, Trump, during the joint press conference, says that things are moving quickly when it comes to such progress. And that's after he said this morning that he believes the war could end within weeks. Here's what he said during that joint press conference. Watch.
Since my return to the White House, we've made more progress toward that goal in 1 month than occurred in the past 3 years. And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly.
President Trump said this morning that he will be meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine perhaps in this week or next. He said that he will also go to Moscow potentially when the war actually ends. And meanwhile, he also emphasized that he's the one right now trying to restore communications with Russia after a few years of pause in that. When asked about what makes him trust Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump says that he believes Putin wants to make a deal that's also good for Russia. Watch.
Tremendous distrust on both sides. That's why it's good that I'm coming in now. But I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal.
And this morning, President Trump says he's in serious talks with Putin, both about ending the war between Russia and Ukraine, about potential economic development transactions between the U.S. and Russia. Meanwhile, the French president, during the joint press conference, first praised President Trump for attempting to strike a deal between U.S. and Ukraine when it comes to rare earth minerals, and also praised him for trying to end the war, as well as he agrees that Europe needs to step up in its efforts to ensure Europe's own security, saying that they want to share more burden that the U.S. has been carrying for years in ensuring European security. And Trump, meanwhile, says the two leaders agreed on several things. One is that this is the right time, and maybe, he says, the only time to bring an end to the war. And second, that the cost and burden of securing the peace in Ukraine needs to be borne not only by the U.S. but also by Europe, emphasizing that Europe needs to play a central role in ensuring a lasting peace in Ukraine. And the third thing that Trump says is that he wants the U.S. to get back the massive amount of money that he says the U.S. has spent on the Ukraine war, and thus the need for a rare earth mineral deal between both both countries. Meanwhile, Macron emphasized that the need to make any peace deal lasting. He says that without security guarantees built into any negotiations, Putin might want to invade again by breaking such agreements. And also, the French president says that the U.S. support will be crucial in maintaining peace, especially as European nations are, of course, considering sending troops into Ukraine as peacemakers and peacekeepers. But he says the U.S. role will be very crucial in this as well. And of course, a lot of progress being made and things are moving quickly, but we're also waiting for the UK Prime Minister to visit the White House later this week, when we expect Trump to make more announcements when it comes to cooperation between the U.S. and European nations. Back to you.
All right, Iris, great report. Good to talk to you. Next, today marks exactly 3 years since Russia invaded neighboring Ukraine. Now more than ever, Kyiv wants to strengthen its ties with the West. President Vladimir Zelensky welcomed world leaders in Kyiv today. Here's more.
Will there be support from America?
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hosting world leaders on Monday's 3-year anniversary of the Russian invasion. This comes amid heightened tensions between President Trump and Zelensky. The Ukrainian president highlighted the need for American assistance during his speech in Kyiv on Monday. He also reflected on Ukraine possibly not being able to join Western alliances.
We have to be honest. Ukraine deserves EU membership as well as security guarantees which NATO offers. If NATO membership for Ukraine, for our people, will remain closed, then we have no other choice but to build NATO in Ukraine.
Zelensky touted increasing Ukraine's economy and military force to withstand Russia. This comes after Britain said it might send its forces to Ukraine after the war ends to act as peacekeepers. Zelensky is hosting a number of international officials in Kyiv. Among the attendees was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who was optimistic about Ukraine joining the bloc.
Ukraine merits-based process, if they continue at that speed and at that quality, perhaps they could be earlier than 2030.
There was no immediate sign of U.S. representation at Monday's 3-year anniversary of the war.
And on this third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, earlier today, Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping affirmed his no-limits friendship with Moscow in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The news was reported by Chinese state-owned media. The talk between China and Russia comes as President Trump pushes for a quick deal to settle the war in Ukraine, citing mounting casualties. Trump said he had very good talks with Putin last week, raising the question of whether the U.S. could drive a wedge between Beijing and Moscow. And China's call with Russia earlier today appeared aimed at dispelling any such prospects. The Chinese regime leader said China and Russia cannot be moved apart, and they're looking at a long-term partnership. Mutual tensions with the United States have moved China and Russia closer. They first declared a no-limits friendship back in 2022 after Putin deployed troops to invade Ukraine. Over the past decade, the two leaders have met over 40 times. Britain unveils new sanctions against Russia, hoping this would force Putin to make concessions in peace negotiations. Britain's Prime Minister said President Trump has changed the global conversation. European leaders are now focused on ensuring any peace in Ukraine is long-lasting. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has imposed further sanctions on Russia as part of an attempt to force President Vladimir Putin to make concessions in peace negotiations. Here's Starmer speaking to a gathering of Ukraine's allies on the third anniversary of the war.
So today we're announcing the UK's largest packet of sanctions since the early days of the war, going after Russia's shadow fleet and going after companies in China and elsewhere who are sending military components.
Russia's so-called shadow fleet is used to transport oil and goods in defiance of sanctions. The new sanctions cover 40 shadow fleet ships as well as 14 wealthy Russian individuals. North Korean officials involved in sending troops to fight for Russia were also listed, as were companies in China, Turkey and India that supply tools and goods to Russia's military. Starmer also told Ukrainian allies they must bring their collective strength to peace efforts.
President Trump has changed the global conversation over the last few weeks, and it has created an opportunity. Now we must get the fundamentals right.
Starmer said any settlement must be based on a sovereign Ukraine and backed by strong security guarantees. He added the UK is ready and willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. He also repeated calls for the US to act as a backstop to deter Russia from launching another invasion in a few years' time. President Trump's talks with Russia and his description of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator have drawn wide criticism from European leaders. British Home Office Minister Dan Jarvis said it was right for Trump to bring Putin back to the negotiating table.
And in the end, I think there's been an acknowledgement for a long time that this conflict is not going to be concluded on the battlefield. It will be concluded as a consequence of a negotiated peace settlement.
He said the US, UK and other allies have a significant role to play in achieving this, though he said this has to be on terms agreeable to Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. Starmer is due to travel to Washington and will meet Trump on Thursday, where he's expected to talk to Trump about support for Ukraine. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
A federal judge has temporarily stopped immigration enforcement from operating at places of worship. Today's injunction comes after several religious groups sued the Department of Homeland Security. The plaintiffs include a Georgia-based network of Baptist churches, a Sikh temple in California, and Quakers from Maryland, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. More than 24 Christian and Jewish groups have filed a similar lawsuit in Washington, D.C. Government lawyers say immigration enforcement activities have been allowed in sensitive places, including houses of worship, for decades. Coming up after the break, Apple announces hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. investments over the next 4 years. CEO Tim Cook met with President Trump a week ago. That and more when we return.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return.
I was a quarterback at Hardaway High School. College first-round draft pick. During the football season, I would stop eating. But I didn't know I was depressed. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father and as a husband. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretang Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretang Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
In today's Business Matters, Starbucks announced job cuts today. CEO Brian Nichols said Starbucks will be laying off over 1,100 corporate workers as it tries to turn around its business. The company will also be eliminating several hundred open and unfilled positions. In addition, the coffee chain is going to eliminate about 30% of its food and beverage offerings over the next few months in order to streamline things. Some of Starbucks' Frappuccino blended drinks, its Royal English Breakfast Latte, and white hot chocolate will be among the items cut, as they're said to be too complex to make and are unpopular with customers. Meanwhile, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway reported record operating earnings over the weekend. In his annual letter to investors, Buffett reported operating profit in 2024 rose 27% to $47.4 billion. Berkshire reported a full-year net income of $89 billion, which is down 7.5% from 2023. In the letter, Buffett wrote, quote, "Berkshire did better than I expected. For the fourth quarter, Berkshire Hathaway's cash ballooned to a new high of $334.2 billion, and that is nearly double the amount the company had in cash this time last year." A new battle between the world's two largest economies. President Trump issued new measures to restrict Chinese investment in critical American technology and infrastructure with a memorandum on Friday. And China dismissed Trump's move one day later, calling it, quote, "very unreasonable," adding to the order. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. is slated to curb Chinese funds in strategic U.S. sectors, including technology, critical infrastructure, healthcare, energy, and so on. It also said the Trump administration will consider expanding the range of the restrictions, targeting sensitive know-how like semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, and others. The order called out China for exploiting U.S. capital and ingenuity to fund and advance the Chinese military and other strategic assets, and that could pose threats to the U.S. national security. China's Commerce Ministry lashed out at the Trump administration over the restrictions and threatened to take necessary measures to fight back. And Elon Musk's Starlink satellite service has rivals, a Chinese state-backed company and another service financed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. And the Chinese firm has reportedly signed a deal with Brazil, who is a frequent critic of Musk. NTD Shar Marshall has more details.
It seems that Elon Musk's Starlink satellite service is viewed by others as a pretty good idea. Rivals offering similar high-speed satellite internet service are pushing into space. Specifically, a Chinese state-backed rival and another service financed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Shanghai-based SpaceSail signed an agreement in November to enter Brazil and announced it was in talks with over 30 countries. 2 months later, it began work in Kazakhstan, according to the Kazakh embassy in Beijing. The emergence of competition to Starlink has been welcomed by Brazil's government, which wants high-speed internet for communities in distant areas, but has had public disagreements with Musk over commerce and politics. Amazon's Project Kuiper also struck a deal last summer to provide satellite connectivity to Brazil and to several other Latin American countries. The advantage of using satellites to provide internet service is that they operate at low altitudes to transmit data extremely efficiently, providing high-speed connectivity for remote communities, seafaring vessels, and militaries at war. Starlink has been seen as a threat to the Chinese Communist Party-led government, which is both investing heavily in rivals and funding military research into tools that track satellite constellations. This is according to Chinese corporate filings and academic papers whose details have not been previously reported. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
And surging egg prices across the U.S. are starting to hit bakeries. The egg shortage is tied to the highly pathogenic bird flu virus, which infected flocks across the country last year. Some bakeries say they are now paying more than double the price from a year ago. Other bakeries say they might have to start using so-called egg replacers. Another factor making business tough for bakeries is the sky-high price of cocoa. And the current U.S. egg shortage has led businesses to look for supply beyond our borders. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, Turkey is the only country the United States imports eggs from. Turkey is said to export 420 million eggs to the United States this year, which, according to the Egg Producers Central Union in Turkey, is the most ever. Experts warn that the increase in egg imports won't make much of a difference in America's egg shortage, especially if the bird flu continues to claim the lives of chickens and birds at its current pace, that is. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the price of a dozen large grade A eggs recently hit an average of just under $5. Prices are expected to rise another 20% this year. A healthy funding round for Just Salads. Its founder, Nick Kenner, said this deal is going to take the successful regional chain and make it a national player in the fast casual field. Just Salad raised $200 million in funding from an investor group led by Wellington Management. The deal values the chain at about $1 billion. Just Salads was founded in 2006. It is known for its salads, wraps, warm bowls, soups, and smoothies. It operates about 100 restaurants, mostly on the East Coast. The company plans to set aside some of the capital to open new locations across the U.S. Good news for people who can't tolerate or just don't like dairy. It won't cost extra to get plant-based milk in your coffee at Dunkin' anymore. The restaurant chain says the new pricing will start March 5th. A spokesperson said the policy change was guided by guest feedback, but there is likely a lot more to the decision. First, competitors like Starbucks, Dutch Bros, Tim Hortons, and Scooters already made the change. Also, a class action lawsuit accused Dunkin' of discriminating against people with milk allergies or lactose intolerance. That suit says non-dairy alternatives don't cost Dunkin' anymore, and it profited off charging customers more for it. A court sided with Dunkin' last May, but the plaintiffs filed an amended complaint in December. That case is still pending. Fast food deals are taking a slice out of the pizza industry. Domino's Pizza reported a slight rise in quarterly same-store sales in the U.S., but it missed estimates based on data from LSEG. CEO Russell Weiner said the company will continue its promotions push. This includes emergency pizza and boost weeks for half of pizza's orders online. Domino's deals are competing with fast food chains and other value meals. The pizza company expects continued consumer pressure this year in the fast food space. On the other hand, Domino's saw some recovery in foreign markets, leading to international same-store growth topping expectations. Meanwhile, Apple has announced it plans to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Here's that story.
The money will fund a giant factory in Texas for artificial intelligence servers and 20,000 research and development jobs across the country in that time. It is also expected to cover spending on everything from purchases from U.S. suppliers to filming of television shows and movies for its Apple TV Plus service. Apple declined to say how much of the figure it was already planning to spend in the country. The move comes after media reports that Apple CEO Tim Cook met President Donald Trump last week. Many of Apple's products that are assembled in China could face 10% tariffs imposed by Trump earlier this month, though the iPhone maker had secured some waivers from China tariffs in the first Trump administration. Apple made a similar announcement about its U.S. spending plans in 2018 during the first Trump administration. Trump, in a Truth Social post, thanked Apple and Cook, saying the move reflected the company's faith in his administration. Shares of Apple were up fractionally in late morning trading.
Trump Media and Rumble are ready to rumble. A Brazilian judge over the video sharing platform. The two have filed an emergency motion in a U.S. court against Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes. This is in response to Moraes suspending Rumble until it complies with court orders. This includes naming a legal representative for Brazil, a requirement for foreign companies to operate locally. Moraes' orders was in response to the firms suing him over accusations of illegal censorship. The emergency motion filed is an attempt to stop the orders by the judge that they argue violates American sovereignty, the U.S. Constitution, and U.S. laws. Now, despite the land being uninhabitable and the property destroyed, lots in Pacific Palisades and Aldina in the LA area are being sold after January's devastating wildfires. Some economists and environmentalists are pushing for a proactive approach to rebuilding. This includes local governments buying damaged properties to create a buffer zone in disaster-prone areas. It's unclear if the federal government will support such measures. One economist notes that building in disaster-prone areas could impact the availability and affordability of insurance across the state. A local real estate agent said buyers have not shown concern about future fire risk. Chinese medical devices are in hospitals all over the U.S., raising concerns over privacy and security. A back door was found in a popular device earlier this year. Here's the story.
Concerns arise over Chinese medical devices found at hospitals throughout the United States, popular because they're cheap, widely available, and useful, but may contain backdoors that could give access and control to China.
Why we allow any technology inside of our borders, inside of any free world borders, is beyond me.
Counterintelligence expert Casey Fleming says he believes all Chinese technology is weaponized to send your data to the Chinese Communist Party and weaken the United States.
The Chinese Communist Party has been at war with the U.S., has listed the U.S. as their primary enemy, and they're at war every day, every hour, against the United States.
Government agencies recently found a backdoor in a popular Chinese medical device, the Contech CMS 8000 patient monitor. It tracks a patient's vital signs like heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature. The agencies say the backdoor could allow Chinese actors to access and change data and even control the device. For example, it could be made to indicate the patient's heart is failing when it's not, leading to unnecessary treatment. The American Hospital Association estimates there may be thousands of these devices in the U.S. Contech, headquartered in Qinhuangdao, China, has not commented.
And Lester Holt is stepping down as anchor of NBC Nightly News. In a memo to staffers today, Holt said he'll continue to host Dateline NBC, the network's primetime news magazine, full-time. Holt will leave the newscast this summer. He was elevated to the job in 2015 and became the first African-American solo anchor of a weekday network nightly newscast. NBC did not immediately name Holt's successor, but Holt's frequent fill-in host, Tom Yamas, is in line for the post. The U.S. Postal Service will soon honor a legendary entertainer with her own stamp. Betty White died more than 3 years ago, just weeks shy of her 100th birthday. The Postal Service will release the stamp next month honoring the late actress and comedian. The Betty White tribute will be a new forever stamp. These stamps never expire and currently sell for 73 cents each. The Postal Service will host a special event on March 27th to unveil the new stamp at the Los Angeles Zoo and Botanical Gardens, where White was a trustee, benefactor, and volunteer. White was a staunch animal rights activist. Okay, on to Wall Street. The Nasdaq Composite closed down more than 1% today, and that's with big technology stocks creating the biggest drag. And this coming as investors worried about demand for technology supporting artificial intelligence. And this is while they waited for results from market heavyweight NVIDIA. S&P 500 closed slightly lower while the Dow was close to unchanged. Demand for NVIDIA's pricey AI chips will be in focus when it reports results on Wednesday. And investors have been questioning hefty spending on the technology since low-cost AI models from China's DeepSeek rattled the industry in January. And that's all today on Business Matters. Stay tuned after the break. Is a $5,000 check from potential Doge savings coming to your family? Nothing is in stone yet, but President Trump is talking about the idea. An NTD data report on how big the check could be and how realistic the proposal is after this.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50 enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
The impact of a meal goes well beyond feeding our bodies. Because when people are fed, futures are nourished. And with your help, together we can end hunger. Join the movement at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Okay, here we go, throw it!
Yeah. You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Nice.
Welcome back. An email sent to federal workers telling them to list what they got accomplished last week sparks mixed responses from federal agencies. Some have instructed their staff to respond, and some have told other staff to hold off. NTD's Jason Blair brings us more from Capitol Hill.
In regards to this email sent out, some federal agencies have given their employees the green light to respond, while some have given them the red light, telling them not to respond. The Department of Defense told their employees to not respond to the email. FBI Director Kash Patel also instructed FBI employees to hold off on responding. And the State Department told their employees that the department will respond on their behalf. Other agencies that also told their employees not to respond include the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, and the NOAA from the Commerce Department. And these are according to internal documents. And among the agencies that told their employees explicitly to respond to the email include the Treasury Department, according to an internal document, as well as the HHS, DEA, FCC, and National Weather Service. Now, this email was sent out to all federal employees by the Office of Personnel Management and instructed them to respond with bullet points of what they accomplished last week by 11:59 Eastern Time on Monday night. Elon Musk promoted this email online, adding that those who do not comply with it will have considered to have resigned. Musk later on clarified that this email is, quote, a pulse check. And at the White House, President Trump also commented on some of the agency's mixed responses. He says that he's not concerned, and this was done in a friendly manner.
Only things such as perhaps Marco at State Department, where they have very confidential things, or the FBI, where they're working on confidential things. And they don't mean that in any way combatively with Elon. We have to find out where these people are. Who are they? And we said, if you don't respond, we assume you're not around.
And last week, a lawsuit was filed by federal workers unions in response to this email and updated on Sunday. The lawsuit alleges that the proper procedures were not followed. It states, quote, prior to February 22nd, no notice was published in the Federal Register or anywhere else regarding any OPM program, rule, policy, or regulation requiring all federal employees to provide a report regarding their work. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Jason Blair, NTD News.
House lawmakers are returning to a week of catch-up with the Senate as leadership pushes for one big bill stuffed with GOP priorities. It's still unclear if Speaker Mike Johnson has the votes. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
House lawmakers are preparing to vote on a budget resolution that will pave a path for one large bill to address Republicans' goals on energy, tax cuts, border funding, and more.
We're going to get the economy going. We're going to get back to American energy dominance in this bill. Yep. And we're going to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state.
All this is paired with steep spending cuts, $2 trillion in spending cuts over 10 years. Democrats are sounding the alarm.
They want to jam $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts down the throats of the American people to benefit their billionaire donors and wealthy corporations, and at the same time, they want to stick everyday Americans with the bill by ending Medicaid as we know it.
Speaker Johnson has denied slashing benefits, but says cuts to waste are on the table. Even so, the Speaker is having a tough time keeping his conference in line. 8 Republicans who represent Hispanic populations warned Johnson against putting safety net programs on the cutting board, while Victoria Spartz already said she's an outright no, though for different reasons. She wrote on X, quote, roughly 85% of spending is not ever even looked at by Congress. Convenient if you would like to hide waste, fraud, and abuse. Johnson's razor-thin margin means one Republican could tank the measure. That's why he's pushing for one bill instead of the two-step approach that the Senate is already on track to pass.
It's going to be a big, beautiful bill, and it has to be by necessity because that gives us the highest probability of success, remembering that I have a small margin in the House. I have one vote for much of this.
I think it'd have a hard time in the Senate, but nobody's pulling for the House more than I am because they can pass one big, beautiful bill that meets the priorities that makes things so much easier. If they can't, then we need to move forward on security component.
Senate Republicans are already a step ahead of the House. Last week, they passed their budget resolution and are now on track to getting their final bill to the finish line. House Republicans, meanwhile, are racing to catch up and take the lead. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
A federal judge today is set to consider a request by the Associated Press. The news agency wants full access for its journalists restored. The Trump administration barred them from the Oval Office and Air Force One for continuing to refer to the Gulf of Mexico instead of the Gulf of America in coverage. The AP sued 3 senior Trump aides on Friday. The news agency argues that the decision to block its reporters from the Oval Office violates First Amendment protections. That's by trying to dictate the language they use in reporting the news. White House spokesman Steve Chung called the lawsuit a blatant PR stunt. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt says the administration believes its position is correct. Leavitt is one of the 3 officials named as defendants in the lawsuit. New York City is set to close its central migrant processing center at the famed Roosevelt Hotel. Mayor Eric Adams making the announcement this morning. The hotel closed in 2020 and reopened as the main intake facility for migrants entering the U.S. via the southern border. Joining us with the latest is NTD's Chris Beers. Chris, give us an update.
Right behind me is the famous Roosevelt Hotel. It is the central migrant processing system in New York City's emergency migrant care system. Since it opened in 2023, it has processed about 75% of New York City's 232,000 migrants that's come into this country since then. At its height, it was processing about 4,000 people per day, and now it's closing. New York City Mayor Eric Adams announcing its closure this morning.
Today, we are announcing the Roosevelt Hotel, which served as both our asylum arrival center and the humanitarian emergency response and relief center for nearly 2 years, will be closing in the coming months. Thanks to the successful strategies we put in place here in New York City and because of policies we advocated for at the border.
The mayor's office says they're planning to close the Roosevelt Hotel Processing Center by June of this year. Between June 2024 and June 2025, the city will have closed 53 emergency shelter sites, including the Roosevelt Hotel, as well as all tent-based facilities at some point in this year. The mayor's office says 80% of migrants that have sought care from the city have taken the next steps in their journeys. They mentioned journeys toward achieving self-sufficiency. The total migrants in the shelter system currently is about 45,000 right now, down from a high of 69,000 in January of 2024. Adams discusses the reduced flow of migrants in New York City's shelter system.
We're down to an average of just 350 new arrivals each week. And while we're not done caring for those who came into our care, today marks another milestone in demonstrating the immense progress we have achieved in turning the corner on the unprecedented international humanitarian effort.
So how much money will all of this save New York City? Mayor's Adams' office says the city is on track to save $5.2 billion over fiscal years 2024, 2025, and 2026. All of this signals the beginning of the end of the migrant crisis in New York City, but Adams isn't willing to say the crisis is over just yet. So the migrant crisis is not done. You can clearly see the line of people behind me waiting to receive services at the Roosevelt Hotel, but it is slowing down. I mean, at the height of this, we saw people lining the street here, even sleeping out on the streets. There were just so many people trying to get into this place. It likely won't pick up again anytime soon, though. DHS says border crossings, border encounters at the southern border are down 93%. Chris Beers, NTD News.
Thank you, Chris. Next, the United States imposed a new round of sanctions today focused on Iran's oil industry. The State Department and Department of the Treasury targeted 22 individuals and 13 vessels. President Donald Trump is looking to squeeze Iran's crude exports in an effort to cut funding for Tehran's nuclear weapons program. Sanctions hit oil brokers in the United Arab Emirates and Hong Kong. Tanker operations and managers in India and China were sanctioned as well for their role in transporting Iranian petroleum. The Treasury also announced additional sanctions against the head of the National Iranian Oil Company and the Iranian Oil Terminals Company. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Iran's oil exports brought in around $53 billion in 2023. And there's unease in the Indo-Pacific, and allies are banding together. Japan and the Philippines have agreed to deepen defense ties in the face of increasing concern over China.
Japan is determined to continue to do its utmost to strengthen Japan-Philippines ties and to ensure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region.
A resilient Japan and the Philippines against unilateral attempts by China and other countries to change the international order and the narrative.
The Philippines and Japan have agreed to strengthen military cooperation, establish a high-level strategic dialogue between their militaries, and deepen information sharing. The Japanese defense minister visited a military base in the Philippines yesterday. While there, he inspected a mobile air surveillance radar system sent by Japan. It's part of a landmark defense pact agreed to last a year between the two countries. Up next, what will happen to the hens when their egg-laying years are over? Well, a farm has some good ideas for their retirement. That and more when we come back.
Come to Mathis Home today and save big during our presidential savings event with markdowns in every department. We've got all the latest looks for every room in your house at incredible savings. Get huge discounts on hundreds of sofas in all the latest styles. Or shop online and find an unbeatable selection of over 230,000 items. We've got it all. For great quality, all the latest styles, and best value, come to the presidential savings event at Mathis Home.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Gongjiong Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Welcome back. President Trump has suggested that 20% of Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE savings could be given to American families will be in the form of what Elon Musk calls a DOGE dividend. The idea came from James Fishback, the CEO of an investment management firm. Our data reporter, Kevin Hogan, is at the hub right now with more on this. Kevin, is a $5,000 check for each tax-paying family a realistic possibility?
Well, the short answer is probably no, and we'll see that when we talk about the breakdown of the federal budget. But we're looking at a hypothetical DOGE check right now because Elon Musk and President Trump are very ambitious about saving taxpayer dollars and being efficient in the way they run the government. Now, there are lawsuits challenging some of these cuts, so not everything has gone according to DOGE's plan, and Congress would eventually have to be the ones to write the check. But there certainly is a possibility that Americans could see quite a bit of money from the DOGE savings. Again, that's 20% of the savings they're planning to divide out. So I wonder Musk's best case $2 trillion savings scenario. Look at that. That's where your 5,000 number is coming from, because there are about 79 million net tax-paying families. So you just do the math, and that's what you come up with. And again, this is coming out in July of 2026. So you got a little bit of time, about a year and a half for DOGE to do their work, and that's what they could come up with. Now, at the same time, there's another good shot chance of $1 trillion savings. That's according to Musk. And as you can imagine, that check would cut down to about $2,500. So you can see there's a range here. They don't really know exactly how much they're going to save just yet. Now, at the same time, let's look at the current pace. So right now, DOGE has cut $55 billion. That's their top line savings, and that would bring your check down to about $2,000 if they kept at this pace. I mean, they've been at it for just over a month now, right? And that's assuming that all of their cuts are just one-time savings, but some of those are annual subscriptions. So let's look at that. Now, the upper bound of that is if they're all annual savings, and now you're looking at over $3,500 for your check. So again, there's a range here, right? And that's all going out in July. But now, what would happen if you had a DOGE check that came out right now, and you're assuming that $55 billion top line savings? Well, then your DOGE check is actually $140. So that's in the bank, so to speak, again, if everything goes according to DOGE's plan. But now there's a little bit more nuance to how they describe how much they're saving, because they only have $7 billion of the receipts listed on their website. So that means that your check is really only $20. Again, big range here, a lot of uncertainty with how they report their savings, and we just don't know exactly what this could amount to. So you see that big range. But now let's look at the federal budget to find out, is it really even possible to save $2 trillion? Well, look at this. This big chunk right here, that's several $1 trillion, that's mandatory funding. That's for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. You can't touch that. I mean, now, Trump has said that he wants to preserve Medicare and Social Security and so on. Maybe they'll find some crafty ways, come up with a few billion, but saving hundreds of billions there, very unlikely. And then this, gray, that's the interest on the national debt. you got to pay that. That's about $1 trillion. So let's take out the two that they can't touch, and now you're left with what's called discretionary spending, right? So you got about just under $1 trillion for the non-defense. That's where Musk can make his moves, and he can try to save American taxpayer dollars. And this is the defense industry, and that's just about $850 billion. So right there, that's where they can make their cuts. But Trump has said that he wants a strong military, so it's very unlikely that they're going to cut from defense. And if you add this up, I mean, that's less than $1 trillion in the non-defense discretionary spending. So how are you going to cut $2 trillion when there's only $1 trillion to cut, right? So let's dive into this a little further. Now you go into, for example, the defense budget. Pardon me, I'll pull this back up. So U.S. defense spending right now, that's broken up into a couple different categories. I mean, operations and maintenance, that's the biggest chunk right there. It's about a third. I mean, you got to maintain your depots and everything like that, do your operations. Military personnel, look at this. I mean, that's about a quarter, right? And then you have procurement. You got to build your aircraft carriers, your jets, and then R&D. You got to make sure those F-35s are in top prime condition, right? And then other, that's like about 5 to 7%, give or take. That's things like destroying chemicals or ammunitions that shouldn't be around anymore. Anyway, that money is going towards something. It's not just, there for no reason. But even if they were to cut that, that's only 7%. I mean, you're talking $55 billion. So you're not raking in hundreds of $1 billion, even if you cut the defense budget quite a bit. So that $5,000 check is probably an unrealistic number. You shouldn't expect to see that. And again, you have to realize that at the end of the day, it's going to be Congress that has to write these checks. And there are a lot of legal challenges to all this already that have led to temporary blocks. So there's a lot of uncertainty around this. And that $5,000, don't go cash that in just yet. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Next, organic farmers in Cyprus have recruited hundreds of retired hens to fertilize olive groves in a pilot project. They say it boosts yields, counters disease as well, and helps to manage food waste. Let's take a look.
While hens are usually sent to slaughter after their egg-laying years, these have been saved by organic farmers in Cyprus who need them to fertilize their olive groves.
So we provide them with a old hen's home, if you like, and they can come here and retire.
A farmer and a soil engineer have launched the Kot project, which they say can boost yields, counter disease, and help to manage food waste. The farmers collect food waste donations to feed the retired hens. Their droppings enrich the soil as natural fertilizer for olive trees. Here is Elena Christoforos, farmer and grove owner of the organically certified Akaki Grove.
They're scratching at the ground, they're scratching at the soil, they're eating the ground cover, they're eating pests, and then also we're bringing food waste, which would otherwise go into landfill. And by bringing the food here, it stops being waste and it enters the system again. And so they're helping us with that as well.
Soil engineer Nicholas Netian holds the world record for producing olive oil with the highest content of inflammation-busting polyphenol.
What we notice is a much better growth and much better fruit bearing of the trees, right? Because of that fertilizer, right? That free fertilizer. The olives that we collected last autumn had 0 olive fly on it, 0 bites, right? So the pest control there was perfect.
The hens can enjoy a long retirement among the olive trees and live up to 10 years despite only laying eggs until the age of 2.
My goal here is to create a biodiverse, self-sustained agro-ecosystem that can sustain really high temperature and long droughts. So when I bring animals in a system, by eating this ground cover and pooping it, I speed up that cycle. So that's why we started putting chickens, because their poo is amazing.
An American skier has won her 100th Alpine Skiing World Cup. Michaela Schifrin extended her win record yesterday, clinching the victory in the Italian resort of Sestriere. Schifrin won the slalom, finishing 0.61 seconds ahead of her Croatian competitor. She became the first skier, male or female, to reach triple digits in World Cup race victories. Schifrin's hunt for her 100th career World Cup win was put on hold after she crashed during a giant slalom race in Killington, Vermont. That's in November, and suffered a puncture wound in her abdomen. The 29-year-old also matched a record for the most podium finishes ever at 155, equaling Swedish legend Ingemar Stenmark. The British Siberian Husky Dog Competition Championship wrapped up its season this weekend in England. Naomi March, winner of the competitive 3-dog category, had this to say. The British Siberian Husky Dog Championship wrapped up its season this weekend in England. Naomi March, winner of the competitive 3-dog category, had this to say.
Nice. It's not obviously nice to win, and obviously you wouldn't be competing if you didn't want to win, but I enjoy sort of taking part with them and actually that team effort, teaching them from scratch when they're babies, teaching their turns, and it's really rewarding when you tell them to take a turn and they listen to you, and it all comes together nicely.
Racers compete in different championship classes. The categories depend on several factors, including the number of Huskies involved. The season consists of 16 rounds, with the racers' best 11 results counting towards their rally. Their tally, that is. They earned 66 points for a win, 57 for second place, and 49 for third. The next British Siberian Husky Dog Racing Championship season begins in November. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Stay with us, though, for evening news at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific.